Hey YouTubers, it's Michael back with The Chosen and Beyond here. So today we're going to cover Season 2, Episode 6, Unlawful. This is a deep episode. I've got notes for this episode. So yeah, we're going to be diving into this. Man, what can I say about this episode? Unlawful. The first word that strikes to my mind is that it's unlawful for Jesus to heal on the Sabbath, and he gets confronted by the priests. That's a pretty powerful scene, although it's at the end of the episode. So that's probably the meaning behind it, the wording. But there's a lot more deep stuff that we get into, because we know in the last episode, Mary took off. She was freaked out by the possessed man. And so we see Mary kind of stumbling, walking away from the disciples. She's ashamed to return. But she will return, and Jesus will tell her, hey, if you think the redemption that was given to you could just be lost in a single day, there wouldn't be a very good redemption, would it? So he's saying, my works were better than that. He's kind of letting her know that. So one of the things to mention about this episode is, I think it's really important that we capture this. So it's and I'll go into it a little bit deeper in the review, but it's about the difference about allowing sin to have power over us in our lives, and versus us pushing sin away from us, because we can make the decision to. If we have gambling problems, we don't go to the casino. We don't use the computer to do the computer gambling. So if you put yourself into the sin a lot, then you're not pushing against it. So it's not allowing the sin to have power over us in our lives, and then seeking God at the right times. So this is a very good example. This is what happens to Mary in this episode, right? So I thought that was very well captured here in this episode. And then also, when Mary returns to Jesus, he says to her, as long as your heart is in the right place and your heart is to the Father, and then you may stumble, but you're gonna recover. You're gonna get back up, right? You're gonna get back up and be fine. I think what I love about this episode is that not only that, but he's starting to send the disciples out in pairs a little bit more, so we're getting a little bit of that foreshadowing of the 2 by 2. So he sends Matthew and Simon out to find Mary. Very unusual pairing. He knows they're not really getting along. So there's that. You see kind of other pairings up as we're going along. You can see it, but that's the primary one. I know that you're seeing James and John's a lot. They're brothers. It makes sense. But then you see, let's see, Thomas and Philip always near each other. So there's a kind of pairing ups going on a little bit. The thing I really love about this episode, really the reference to the Son of Man. So towards the end of the episode, Jesus is confronted about violating the Sabbath or healing on the Shabbat, however you want to forward it. He says, look, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. So he's basically telling me you didn't do your homework. If you know what's happening now, if you really did your homework and you really had true faith and understanding, you wouldn't be approaching me like this at all. Yeah. So I do really love that. So there's a lot of really great Old Testament references here. So that's Daniel 7 that we just mentioned, the Son of Man prophecy, when he says he's Lord of the Sabbath. So that's why he has the authority to do anything he wants to do on the Sabbath that he thinks he needs to do. If he wants to heal somebody, he's going to heal somebody, right? You don't tell God and his prophets and the Son of David, right, what he's going to go do. So funny. Yeah, you really should know who you're talking to. So anyway, so there's that. I want to say that I know there's another tie into some other scriptures that are really powerful. I want to say it's Isaiah. It is Hosea. I don't know how to pronounce it, but yes, so Hosea 6. I go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Yeah, that's Matthew 9. And then you have Hosea 6. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. So, yeah. So he's basically saying, look, you got so caught up in your rituals and your rules, you missed out on a lot of things, and you've missed what the prophets have said to prepare you for the coming of the fulfillment of the prophecies. And there's many prophecies. We already know about John the Baptist fulfilling his prophecy, right? We have Jesus fulfilling the Messianic prophecy. So there's a lot of things going on, and so yeah, but this episode has got also some dark scenes, because Mary goes and gets lost she goes into a tavern and she's gambling, there's drinking going on, and there's some scary characters. There's just a lot going on there, and so just a forewarning a little bit that there's a little bit of that there, but it all turns out well, and we'll break down each scene as best we can, tie in the scriptures to it and see what we can learn and find. Okay, let's dive into it. Okay, so starting in our first scene here, we're going way, way back here now. I love when The Chosen does this. They did this a few times in season 1, where they went back and they showed Moses and Jacob towards the end of the season. And now we're seeing that again. We're seeing Achimelech the priest here. So, yeah, a very important character for the show. Might not be someone you recognize right away from scripture, but I believe it's in Samuel, so we'll get into that here in a few minutes. We open in this scene. The priest named Achimelech is preparing the bread of the presence with his young son. It's a really powerful opening. We are setting the stage for something here that Jesus later is going to reference in the episode. So he's preparing the bread. He's explaining to his son that the bread is... it's not for God to eat, it's for God, but really it's more of a remembrance of God's presence and that he dwells among us. It's really cool. This may be a tie into Leviticus 24, this bread that we set out for every Sabbath and eaten only by the priests. It represents the intimacy with God. And the sacred rule, they would not give this bread away normally. So what happens in this third scene here in this image, suddenly the doors open and it's David. So we're seeing King David here before he's king. This is after he has conquered Goliath. We know that because of we're going to get into that, but we know because he basically says, hey, I'm on an urgent message for the king. This is a bit controversial, and I will dive into this a little bit more into the description, but essentially David tells the priest that he's on a mission for the king. The Chosen selected a very unusual way to present this because technically he's not really working for the king, but they're portraying it as if the priest is smart enough to know that this is another mission for him. And there's a time where King Saul who was king when Goliath came and the armies and they tried to take over Israel, and David saved them. He threw the rock and took down the giants. But after that, there's a time where King Saul is pursuing to kill David because 1, he's gone mad, and 2, he basically doesn't want him to be able to rule. And there's a lot of things there. I haven't read all the Old Testament surrounding this, but I know broad strokes. But essentially he says, hey, what about that bread? Can I have that bread? Hey, it's really important. And I am running from the king, but in the way it's portrayed by The Chosen, he's saying the King of Kings has given me a mission. So he's saying he's doing this for God. So I think there's enough tie-in in Samuel that I'll try to tie in later. I think it's Samuel 21 and 22. There's enough in there, I think, to reinforce the fact that this priest was smart enough to know that David was trying to do something good. He wasn't up to mischief here, right? He wasn't doing this to circumvent the kingdom, right? So basically, David asked for the holy bread that was being exchanged for the new bread, and his hunger and need outweighs this ritual of them not being able to give out the bread. So this is exactly what Jesus will reference later when he's challenged about healing in the Sabbath. And then we do know a little bit sad, and later in Samuel, we do know that the king does punish the priests here. But even when they do that, the priest, I think this is a really good representation here, the priest is saying, go, I trust you, go and do this. And later when he's confronted in scripture, not in The Chosen, but in scripture, he reinforces this. He says, hey, God was with him, but I didn't question it. And really, you shouldn't be questioned either. And so Saul has them executed. It's basically. But in this scene here, though it's typically not lawful, right? He gives it to him anyway. And Achimelech says to him, he senses something big coming through him. David jokes back and says, nothing could have been bigger than the giant. The priest says, we'll see. So this is this is a subtle bit of foreshadowing as he's talking about the kingdom coming through the line of David. There's that. And then there's also Jesus, son of David, right? A very well known part of prophecy later, right? So that could have been some hinting to that as well. So as we move forward a little bit here, so now we're back in normal time. Remember in the last episode, Mary Magdalene was really shaken by the possessed man, so she took off. Jesus sent Simon and Andrew here to look for her. They have not been able to find her. It's the next day, the next morning, and they're freaking out, looking for her. They have no clue really where to go. They're arguing here a little bit on what the plan should be. And I'm not sure about the timing of this. I'm not sure. I feel like this might be a flashback to a few hours before that, maybe, or maybe it was still 6 or 7 in the morning and they were still gambling and it looks like drinking here. Mary kind of comes to her senses after realizing, I really don't want to stay here at this table any longer. I really shouldn't be here. So she comes to her senses and leaves. In the meanwhile, while this is happening, we have John and James, and they're reflecting on the scenario that's going on right now, and they're a little bit confused. They're saying, we don't understand all the situations, I would say better, that Jesus is putting us into, and now we have Simon Z here, who's a good addition, but it's very unusual. They don't understand. They're not able to reconcile the ways of the world in the way that Jesus' key mission is stretching them, right? It's putting them into this. They're not really understanding everything that's going on. So they're having a little bit of discussion about that. And then in this next scene, Simon and Matthew see a soldier kind of leaving this area, and he mentions that he was just coming up from some stairs. So they're like, wait a minute, we didn't see any stairs. So they look down the stairs, they realize there's a tavern there or something that they didn't investigate. This is also a really interesting tie-in, a reminder of Psalms 139, right? Jesus mentioned this, keep that thought with you. If I make my bed in the depths, you're there. So that's another indicator that Mary might be down there. They get down there. Mary has left already, but they see the same men. And this gentleman here, she was gambling primarily with, he says, sounds like your description, sounds like you were talking about this Lilith, which was Mary's tavern name, and alludes that she was there and took off. So as they're coming back up, they're arguing with, all right, which direction are they going to go? And Mary actually hears them, calls out to them, and they are able to find her kind of hanging out very nearby that entrance. Matthew and Simon try to convince Mary to leave. She's reluctant, but Matthew leads the charge here. He says, listen, Mary, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be learning as much. Raymond wouldn't be reading. Simon also mentions that you've helped other people, so they're able to convince her to come back home. Meanwhile, we have our great, fantastic investigators here, Shmuel and Yanni, still petitioning for Jesus to be investigated. So they've gone ahead and they're back in Jerusalem here, and they're pursuing through one of the associates of President Shimon, who's a proxy for the Sanhedrin, and they're trying to get him to realize that not only do they know Jesus of Nazareth is the name, but that he's invoked the Son of Man prophecy here. There's a little bit of foreshadowing what's going to happen at the end of the episode, and this is tied into Daniel 7, right, with the Masonic prophecy. So the representative here is, a lot of people have said that. You're not really bringing in anything new. Stop wasting my time here. This next image, we have Mary returns to camp with Matthew and Simon. There's not really a dramatic entrance here. She's very kind of walking in slowly. She's sad. She's ashamed that she left, and she's unsure what to say. But in this moment, it's really beautiful because she trusts those around her. Mother Mary kind of grabs her and says, here, come with me. I'll take you to him right away. Let's not wait. And really beautiful. Mary goes to Jesus and she says, I'm sorry, you redeemed me and now I threw it all away. And so Jesus responds back really well. Of course, Jonathan here, the actor, it wouldn't be much of a redemption if it could all be lost in a single day. So I thought that was a really cool response, basically saying there's more there, and reassures her that as long as she continues to give her heart to the Father, and sin is always going to be around, as long as she's able to battle that back, she's going to be just fine. So a little bit later here, we come out, and Jesus was already praying in his tent about this, but now we have Simon and Philip and a few of the other disciples talking about John the Baptist's arrest. So there's a lot of tension there. Andrew's very upset. Simon Z is, hey, listen, we can just go break them out. I know some guys. I love how they throw in some of the mafia lingo, but he's like, I know some people. I got a few guys that can help us out here. And then Andrews wants to go, but I think they make a decision here. The risk is too great. And this just so we have to trust God's timing, right? Even those who walk with Jesus especially have to trust his timing. So to make a decision not to try to break him out, or at least go to Jesus and ask you for the permission to break him out. That would have been funny, actually, to see that maybe. But okay, so then Jesus speaks to the disciples, and so he says, we're leaving in the morning, we pack up, they're running low on food. And he's leading a small group to a synagogue near town. Jesus mentions that John's arrest has made him nostalgic for visiting smaller towns, smaller places. This is like a nod to Jesus' roots. He's setting up for signs to be in smaller areas right before he goes to the big cities. And this is something that's discussed quite often with the disciples asking him, and even John the Baptist had asked him previously, why are you hanging out in these small towns? So he's allowing more time for his voice to spread and message to spread. So as we move forward here, Jesus comes into the synagogue. Now there's a lot of scripture that covers the withered hand. Matthew 12 and Mark 3, just to name a few. But this man's name is Elam. He sees him with the withered hand. He is trying to stay in the background. Jesus walks up to him and he says, come to me, and he's going to heal him. The synagogue leaders see him, that he's approaching and speaking to the man while they're giving their service. And they're very offended. They're saying, hey, who are you? It's unlawful to heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus here is going to redefine what the Sabbath really means here in a moment. So Jesus tells him to stretch out his hand, and he's instantly healed within just a few moments. Just like that, mercy overrides ritual here, right? So the leaders are furious. I think this is also kind of a tie into Matthew 12, after healing, the Pharisees went out and plotted to murder Jesus, right? So they were always coming after him after he healed. So this is really a turning point for Jesus' compassion and how serious he is about saving the people and then getting his message out. So the Pharisees chase him out. They say leave, or the priests ask him to leave. And so as they're leaving town, Simon absent-mindedly grabs some grains to eat. It's a small act, but technically it's a violation, right? Because they're not supposed to harvest on Shabbat. And so it's looking bad, but Jesus says, don't worry, it's fine, I give you permission. If this moment happens, the two leaders here, it looks like one might be a Sadducee and the other one's a rabbi, not sure. But they said, hey, where do you think you're going? You made a mockery of our synagogue. What's your name? What's your lineage? So they're trying to document who he is, and they're pressed to try to bring some charges against him. But Jesus isn't going to play by their rules, right? He's here to rewrite the rules a little bit, at least. At the same time, they're attacking him. They're saying, oh, also, in addition to healing this guy during our service, you're going to allow your disciples to eat harvest on Shabbat. And so immediately Jesus says, okay, do you remember when Achimelech the priest gave David the bread of the presence, although it wasn't lawful? The priests argued with him that was an emergency, but Jesus is about to show them that mercy isn't always require an emergency, right? So he says to him, really powerful here in this scene, something greater than the temple is here. If you had known what this means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. So this ties into a lot of different scriptures. We know this is in Mark 2 and I think Matthew 12, but basically there's a lot to be talked about. And the Son of Man is a part of the prophecy of Daniel as well. So we know there's a lot of scripture tie-ins to this. So these priests are very shocked to hear this. They're completely overwhelmed. They know they're way out of their depths here, and they need to go back and discuss the situation. So Jesus says, claiming that he, as the Son of Man, has the right to do what needs to be done during the Sabbath. And if that includes merciful actions, that he's going to be doing that. And so as they're walking away, we see Matthew here as talking to Philip, because he looks to Philip like a mentor. And he says, that phrase, Son of Man, really bothers a lot of people. And Philip just looks back, smiles, and says, yeah, I'll explain that to you later. But we know that's a little bit of humor after such an intense moment. But this is hinting at the different layers of Daniel 7, the Son of Man receiving eternal dominion. It describes the Son of Man of having authority in the land. Yeah, so we're wrapping this up. So this was a little bit quicker of a review on this episode. I tried to hit the high-level notes. The very last scene we see here is the priests back in their synagogue and their quarters talking about what they're going to do. They're not really sure they have enough influence there, so they mentioned they're going to go seek out other leaders in a nearby town, and so they're going to start drafting a letter to the authorities here. So all in all, I really love this episode. It's a great episode that talks about the differences between allowing sin to have power over us in our lives and seeking out God at the right times and trusting his not only timing, but worship God in our hearts the right way. We might stumble, but we'll get back up. So I think that's definitely reflected in the scene with Mary, right, with her issues. She leaves and comes back, but we also see that the other disciples, some of them are also struggling with things. And so, yeah, Matthew and Simon are arguing a lot, but they were able to finally come together, and he sent them for a reason. So he's starting to pair the disciples up together for lessons that needed to be learned with each other. So I thought it was a really good episode, especially the end. I really love the scene with the Son of Man. I found that very motivating, and I started to read some more old scripture because I didn't really know a lot about it. So really interesting. Thank you for watching The Chosen and Beyond. Please watch thechosen.tv. The links will be in the description. I believe there's still a few days left to watch season 5 in theaters if you want to check that out. Please give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and a subscribe if you are not already a member. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you again for joining us today. See you again soon. Bye-bye.